All right, we're still going with I Once Was a Pilgrim. With each passing week, I grew braver, realizing that to be afraid in Lebanon was to fear everything I sought to find on this pilgrimage. Because of this, I boarded a bus by myself to Byblos, sharing a seat with a woman who was off to the sea to celebrate her birthday. We sat shoulder to shoulder, knee to knee, and laughed with one another over the many bumps in the road. When her stop had come, she enveloped me in her arms, pressed her phone number into my palm, and said, "If there's anything you need, anything at all." As the bus pulled away, I thought of how lucky I was to be able to read. As the bus pulled away, I thought of how lucky I was to have come to Lebanon and to have experienced the kindness and the warmth of the Lebanese, who are warmer and kinder than the month of May. Byblos, also known as Jabil, traces its roots back to over 10,000 years, and like many cities in the Levant, it is said to be one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. Here live Phoenicians, Persians, Romans, and even those from more distant shores. In Byblos, there's another Crusaders' castle that dates well before the 12th century. Over the course of the Crusades, the castle changed hands between the Christian West and the Islamic East. A millennium later, it still stands. Hours were spent exploring this castle, running my hands along the roughness of the rocks and stumbling upon the stones. In a far corner, there's a Persian gate with the head of a lion, still visible after thousands of years. Its eyes open, its mouth closed, as if sworn to silence, but not to sight. I too was silent, reveling in a day like no other. Among these ruins was the happiness that I had been seeking, if only I was ready to accept it. The wind came and brought with it the salt of the sea, the warmth of the sun, and the scent of orange blossoms. For the whole of the afternoon, this wind never ceased. It blew soft and warm among the wild flowers. I walked among them, thinking how the wind is many things, but never a liar. A single gust alone can betray the years that have passed by sweeping them away in a matter of moments, carrying us from a present into our past without a care of whether that was where we wanted to go. Before leaving the castle, I faced the wind and whispered to it, "Come for me. Come for me often. Come when I need you the most, and take me back to this day, the best of my life." I'll do another side. I'll talk about this some other time. Outside the gates of the citadel, there is a mosque, its single minaret piercing the clouds and even the sky. Upon leaving the castle, the call to prayer began, the first words echoing from the mountains to the sea. I closed my eyes and opened my heart to make space for this grace, allowing the song to fill all that might still be empty inside of me. And for the briefest of moments, I was full. Walking away from the citadel, I had to remind myself that I know nothing of Islam, save for this. It is now that I am learning the 99 names of God. After I wandered the cobble streets, intoxicated by the spring of Lebanon, the city of Byblos stretching like a canvas painted in the purples that once made Phoenicia famous. By evening, I found myself alone at a table under a trellis of jasmine and jacaranda. Meze was ordered, fatouche, libneh, and magmour. My daily sustenance in Lebanon, from which I never tired. I only hungered for more. Bread, still warm and rising from the oven, was brought to the table. Tearing from its edges, steam escaped and whirled around jars of mint, radishes, and olives before vanishing into the dusk. I reached for one of these olives, sliding it between my fingers to my lips. And then the world, always so determined to go on, stopped. From the flesh came the taste of lemons, of liquid, of life. Never had something so perfect been tasted, not until Lebanon, not until this. Again, I closed my eyes and returned to the place where revelry and reverence are one and the same. Pulling the pit from my mouth, not yet ready to part with its flesh, I learned in that moment only this: let the small surprise you. Let it fill you up. Let it make you whole. Surrendering myself to what remained of the day, I stood on the ancient seawall, waiting for the sun, still warm against my skin, to set. Lightning streaked across the sky. I listened for thunder and waited for rain, but rain would not come. Not here, not yet. And still the wind. Eventually the sun sank into the faraway west, flashing green on the horizon, a last light before darkness, and then it was night. In the morning, before returning to Beirut, I went to the Armenian Genocide Orphans Museum to learn of an often unspoken history. Even after 10 a.m., I was the first and only person to arrive at its gates. My dearest friend is of Armenian descent. Over the course of our friendship, she has shared stories of all the nights she was kept awake by the cries of her great-grandmother who escaped the violence in Armenia in 1915, a violence that began the year before and did not end until 1923. She arrived in America shortly after, but she could never forget the war or the country she left behind. The museum is small like a chapel, with brick walls accented by soft light. Armenian folk songs echo through the Still learning to read slowly. I'll get there one day. Armenian folk songs echo through the chamber, returning me to another place, another time. When the lights grew brighter, more of the museum came into view, but I hesitated to take any further steps. To move would be to move into a violent past in which mothers and fathers disappeared. Villages were destroyed, children were displaced and deported, and 1.5 million Armenians were killed. To move would be to step into a history that has been repeated all too often despite our protestations of never again. Sepia-tone photographs grace the walls, portraits of Armenian children who lived and died during the 8 years of genocide, their clothes ragged, their feet covered in dust and dirt. In silence I stayed, memorizing their eyes, their hands, their faces, wondering how many of these children ever returned to Armenia. How many could never go back? Beyond the walls of the museum, clouds gathered in the mountains, but they held no rain. In the garden, lemon trees opened their leaves to the sun, and wildflowers bloomed in the pastels of May. And yet, despite these signs that speak to the persistence of life, I was reminded of just how often in the spring, when the world ordinarily gives birth, these genocides begin. Solemnly I returned to Beirut, wondering all the while if this violence will ever end.